Well, this is actually one of the things I'm looking forward to for this whole virtual experience is we'll actually have lunch and things like that, because as all of you know, like time just kind of passes. But no, I've usually on the third day, I get a little bit of time to go walk around in the vicinity.
Welcome to this special edition of the Fine Homebuilding podcast with coverage from IBSx, the 2021 virtual experience. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. I'm joined by producer Jeff Rose, editorial advisor Mike Guertin, builder Bryan Uhler of Pioneer Builders, Rob Wadstack, Fine Homebuilding digital brand manager, and Paige Baumgartner, project manager for Advantech, and Chris Cook, content specialist for Huber Engineered Woods. Please email your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Hey, thank you very much, everybody, for joining me. This is going to be a cool thing. We're kicking off our coverage of the Builder Show, which starts tomorrow. And we're going to talk about what we're hoping to get out of the show and how this experience is going to be different from years past. I'd like to ask you all first, do you want to talk about what the virtual trade show is all about? By that, I mean, what does it look like to attendees? When I first heard that the Builder Show was going virtual, I had trouble imagining what it would look like. Paige and Chris, why don't you go first? What is Huber doing for the visitors of their virtual booth at IBSx?
Well, you're absolutely right. With the situation in 2020 with the virus, and virtual trade shows were just an entirely new nut that we would have to crack. And so we learned a lot over the year as we tried to piece it together. The Fine Homebuilding Summit back in October was a great kind of lesson. We really watched that closely to see if people would be interacting with those hour-long kind of webinars, just how it would function.
If I can interrupt you, what did you think? Do you think we did a good job?
Definitely. I've heard nothing but good things about it. It was pulling it off, especially, like I mentioned, we learned a lot from just watching that, but pulling it off on a rather, not short notice, but much more in the thick of the unknown this past fall was just incredibly impressive. And so what we tried to do was we started off with, what do people want when they come to an in-person trade show? And they want to learn about what's new. They want to get their questions answered. Many people in the booth, when we're talking with folks that come by, they come with a question often. And they want to kind of see and be seen. The booth is a place to be social. I've heard nothing but lament for the lack of that interaction over the past year. People love getting together. And so then we kind of put it through the lens of, I think most of you are familiar with our At Huber Wood Instagram profile. And the three kind of pillars of our strategy for that are to educate, to celebrate, and to laugh. And that really kind of focused our speaker heavy kind of idea of how we were going to present the programming for our virtual IBS.
Can I interrupt you there?
Sure.
Are you going to have these pre-recorded, or do folks have to tune in to your booth at a certain time to hear the presentations?
A little bit of both. So just to overcome any of the, Murphy's Law potential for live recordings, we have the programming all kind of set and ready to go, but we are going to air it at certain times to kind of get that event style aspect to it. And then they'll be available as the show goes on. So once something airs, live, people can see it afterwards. And really that is just to kind of focus in on the chat function. We'll have our Huber representatives in the portal throughout the entire day, to where the people that bring their questions can definitely find someone to ask.
Paige, you're on the Advantech product, am I right? And what are you doing for attendees at the booth?
Correct. So we have all of these different chat rooms set up, and I'm going to be in the Advantech main stage, and then also for our new product launch that we're going to be debuting at IBS this year. And we just invite all of the builders and other folks that are interested in learning about some of the products that we're launching, or maybe they want to brush up a little bit more about Advantech, have questions, we'll be there in the chat rooms to answer all those questions. And we can even make appointments later on in the month or in the week to have follow-ups for more in-depth conversations. So we've got all hands on deck. Our sales teams are in the chat rooms. We're all plugged in. We're able to have more people on the sales side and on the corporate side engage with this virtual platform, which has been great because normally it's, there's only so many people that you can take to the trade show, just based on capacity. So it's going to be a lot of engagement. I'm really pumped for it.
Yeah,
I'm going to ask, I'm sorry, Chris?
I was just going to say, to Paige's point, it's limitless. All the people that normally wouldn't travel and take the week off and everything like that, we're able to include them in this year's show because of the virtual aspect of it.
Bryan, I'm going to ask you, have you been to a virtual trade show or a presentation since the outbreak? And what was your experience? And what would you tell folks who were trying to present to builders how to do a good job?
I went to the Fine Homebuilding Summit for some of those events, and I did do the different virtual booths, if you will. And that was pretty helpful for me.
You're using one of those vendors that were at the summit, am I right?
Yeah, I'm actually working with AGS Stainless on railing for a deck that's cantilevered. And then also I got hooked up, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, with Dan Edelman with Rockwool. And so I'm part of their elite builder program. So I've been able to make 2 connections that way. I know there was a Huber booth there, but of course we already used Advantech and Zip. So there wasn't too much time I needed to spend in that booth, which is, I think, kind of my approach to this particular place, is to look for those things that I'm interested in, spend a little time there, and then the chat seems to work pretty well.
What has been your experience, Bryan, with what do these places physically look like? Is it, for lack of a better word, I described it as Minecraft in some instances. Do you think that's a fair description, or is it more savvy than that?
Well, Patrick, I'm not really a Minecraft aficionado, so I can't empathize with you when it comes to that analogy. But it's just like a website. Honestly, it's just like an interactive website. They've got different videos that you can watch that are pre-populated. Maybe they're 2 minutes long, which I think is worth spending some time just getting education. And then you just put in your name for a chat, and they'll get back to you and go from there.
Have you found that the folks who are answering the chat are knowledgeable and can answer your questions?
I didn't ask too many questions, so I don't think I'm in a good place to answer that.
Yeah. Mike, what about you? You and I talked ahead of planning this, that you'd been to some virtual, trade show or media type things. And, what was your experience?
Well, I'd been to and participated on both ends, both on the presenting side and on the attendee side for the JLC Live, the remodeling show, and the Deck Expo, and as well as the Fine Homebuilding Summit. And they were a little bit of a letdown. Now, I think I'm a little tainted in that, my opinion, because I really enjoy the in-person experience. I really, those are highlights of my year, as well as IBS, is going and meeting people from all over, seeing people I haven't seen in, 6 months or a year. But as far as the exhibitor side, the companies didn't do a really good job at engaging the people who were attending. Some didn't even staff their virtual booths. And I was really excited as Chris and Paige were talking, and I've noticed it going to the IBS website, is that Huber's really jumped in with 2 feet. In other words, they figured out a way that they can engage with people who are attending. So I think that will be really helpful, and hopefully other exhibitors are doing that at the IBSx, so that it's not a letdown, so that we can actually learn something from the exhibitors, as we usually do, going to each of the virtual booths.
Yeah,
Rob, have you been to any of these type things, and what do you think?
Well, so I haven't really interacted with the booths so much on the front end as a sort of an attendee, but between the summit and getting us ready for IBSx, I've seen the process of putting the back end together, and I think I share the same feeling with most people in that part of part of what I'm going to miss is all that interaction. But like as a few of you have pointed out, the silver lining is that you can kind of do a lot more at the same time because your resources aren't spread so thin, and you're not limited by the travel expenses and all the different places you have to run to throughout the day when you're on the floor. So, I mean, I see certainly some benefit to that for our booth, is in that we'll be able to have some of our colleagues that would be either not there or running around, interacting with people even during some of these presentations, including, some of our future podcast episodes.
I was going to say that I've had two media presentations, much like I would have at, a trade show booth at the Builder Show or another trade show. And they were very different experiences. One was very much like this. It was a Zoom call. And ahead of the presentation, the manufacturer sent me samples of the product they were going to be talking about. And I asked them questions very much like I'm asking questions to you guys. And it was very comfortable. It was very much like meeting in a conference room and talking to them in person. I also had the experience where we went into the virtual world and toured houses to see new products. And, I didn't find that to be as useful with regard to learning about products, because it's a still image. It's not the real thing. And I think when we're talking about building products, touching, feeling, seeing in person is really important. Would you agree with me, Chris? How are you guys dealing with that lack of tactile experience that's so important to the people who use your products?
That's a great point, especially because we're launching a handful of new products at the show this year. And the one way that we really tried to get around that is by having a sample button everywhere. And so it may be slightly delayed, but if you go and you're interested in a new product, we can definitely, within a couple weeks, get you a sample of it to be able to touch and feel and everything like that. So it's just a little delayed gratification on it.
Well, that's not that much different than many of your, attendees in the in-person trade show booth, right? You scan their badge and you send them materials later. It seems like a no-brainer. What a great idea.
Absolutely. It's tough to stick a panel in your little pouch and carry it around all day.
I might try if you guys would give me one.
Patrick, I have to wonder what it would have been like if, we're on the cusp of this whole virtual reality and 3D becoming more mainstream. I mean, certainly in the gaming community, it's pretty common. And even at IBS last year, there were a couple of exhibits. There was one where you put some VR goggles on and you have to try to put out a fire. It was a fire safety booth, and it was kind of fun. And you got to wonder if that technology was a little bit more mainstream, if everybody would have been home with their VR goggles and just mingling with the people in a virtual floor.
Why couldn't it be done? People go to virtual raves, right? And you have hundreds of people there. Why couldn't you do the same thing at a trade show, right?
Yeah.
Mike, I'm going to ask you first. You have a long history with the Builder Show, both presenting and attending. When did you first start going? And can you tell me some of your favorite experiences and one train wreck that you're willing to share?
I started going in the late 1990s, back when they were at smaller venues like the Dallas Convention Center and the Atlanta Convention Center. There's really no highlight, because every year that I've been seems to top the previous year, even during the downturn when, 2010, 11, 12, because like I mentioned before, it's just all about, for me, getting to meet builders from all over the country, and then finding those little gems of new products that you really don't notice when you go to a company's website, because it doesn't have the big banners all over it. But when you go to their booths, even if it's a company you've done business with for years, and they go, oh, this is what we're showing, because it's the IBS, they save everything and they, introduce it then. So it's finding all those neat things. Train wrecks are usually behind the scenes, because of doing the presentations. For a number of years, like you mentioned, I've been doing presentations either with companies at their booth, or more recently for the IBS at the High Performance Building Zone. And the train wreck is usually the days before the show, when we're scrambling to solve tremendous problems where the booths have fallen apart and our demos are just not going to work because the materials didn't show up on time and those kind of things. No different than a regular job site when you're trying to meet a deadline.
Sure, that's true. How about you, Brian? How long have you been attending the show, and what is your main objective when you go?
I would say it's pretty close to the late 90s, like Mike. When I was in my late teens or so, I remember going to, I think JLC had been down in Las Vegas. So I remember they had a booth set up, and our lead carpenter, Dave, at the time they had a competition that you could take a hammer and throw it, and if you could stick the forks to a 2x4 or 2x6, you would get some kind of a prize. So that was nice and interactive. But
did he win?
Of course. Yeah, those were the guys back in the day that knew exactly how to throw an axe properly. But yeah, so I've been going for probably 20 some years. And what Dad's always said is, if you can walk away learning one thing, it was worth the time. So I'm usually just scanning for new products. The whole playing field has changed with this whole social media thing. I mean, I remember talking to Mike at JLC in Portland a couple of years ago. I've seen him doing the deck thing. I remember back 20 some years ago, the guy was talking about flashing, and I didn't have a clue what he was talking about. So that was a class that we attended. I don't typically do that, but sometimes I'll just sit and watch the people on the floor. They'll have classes set up. Last year I sat down or stood there, probably spent 20, 25 minutes. It was a social media one for the kitchens and bath side. So
they were teaching you how to use social media. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was pretty interactive, especially at the end. They had a lot of questions and answers. They started talking about TikTok, and one of the guys was saying that that's going to be the next thing. So
are you TikToking, Brian?
I'm not. I tried a little bit. I just couldn't get there.
Rob, when did you start going to the Builder Show, and what do you try and do or not do when you're there?
Well, honestly, since I wasn't a print editor at the magazine, even though I've been there for 10 years, nobody invited me for a really long time. I went, I think last year was actually my second time there. So the one mistake I made the first year was not buying a new good pair of shoes, because my feet were killing me by the end of it. I mean, I can't even imagine how many miles I walk on that floor. But the challenge with us is that we're trying to cover the event while we're also trying to learn stuff, and we're trying to experience as much as we possibly can. And it's just like, that's the one thing about that show, is that everyone warns you in advance that it's going to be so much bigger than you could ever imagine, and it's true. And I mean, that's certainly one thing I'm going to miss, and I'm going to look forward to hopefully next year. But yeah, I mean, and I mentioned this to you before the podcast today, is that one of the big things, and maybe you're going to bring this up, one of the big things for me is that if I'm going to travel to a new part of the country, I want to.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that later.
Yeah, I'll talk about that later.
Chris, how long have you been coming to the show, and do you walk the floor despite having the responsibility of having your own booth to manage and things to do?
Well, this is actually one of the things I'm looking forward to for this whole virtual experience is, we'll actually have lunch and things like that, because as all of you know, like, time just kind of passes. But no, I've usually on the third day, I get a little bit of time to go walk around in the vicinity, but there's usually so much activity in the Huber booth that I'm usually on my feet there the entire time. I think my first one was Orlando 2018 when I first started working with Huber. Yeah.
How about you, Paige? Do you get a chance to leave the booth and see what else is going around, or do you have to answer questions to your visitors for the whole time?
Yeah, so before joining the Advantech product team, I was on the innovation team. So similar to Brian and Mike, I would walk the floor, see what's new, what's everybody doing, and put a lot of steps on the Fitbit walking around. But yeah, so the last IBS last year that we had it, I was on the booth all day, no lunch, just talking to customers and builders and everyone that wants to come in.
Jeff, I'm going to pull you from behind the curtain to ask you a couple things. One, when did you start going to the Builder Show? And go ahead.
Sorry, no, it's got to be about 5 years ago. So,
and you know, you're going to downplay it, but I would argue that you have one of the most difficult jobs at the Builder Show from the Taunton team. You know, we record 1 or 2 podcasts at the show, then you have to go back to your hotel room, edit it, encode it, upload it all in time to have it ready to air the following day. Is this harder or easier for you, or is it the same?
well, it's, I think it'll be close to the same, a little bit different because usually when we're at the show, I just do the audio version of the podcast during the show and then the video follows the next week. So this time they'll go simultaneously. So it'll be interesting.
I'm going to ask you, Jeff, since you're on the show right now, but do you miss traveling to Orlando or Las Vegas to attend the show?
A little bit, although, you know, neither place do I get to see much other than
your hotel and the convention center.
Exactly. Yeah.
I will say that the quick turnarounds on the podcast during the show is one of the most impressive things that I've ever seen. When you're waking up in the morning to listen to the podcast from the day before on your way into the trade show, just the turnaround on that is impressive.
Well, it's all Jeff, and I will say it's not easy.
No.
What about you, Chris? Do you miss going to the show? Do you like being able to get lunch?
Exactly. I mean, it's going to be different, but I do enjoy all of the social aspects of it and meeting people and being able to see, all of our friends from across the country. We tried to do something similar with that by incorporating like Matt Reisinger and Tim Uhler and Steve Basic, Jake Bruton, all into our programming, but it won't be the same as being in person, especially like the Keep Craft Alive event. That's always one of the highlights of my week. How is Fine Homebuilding going to approach that?
Rob?
Well, to tell you the truth, I haven't even really heard a whole lot about Keep Craft Alive experience in this show, which I think is kind of sad, but it just, I think it was just a matter of, we didn't really know what to do about it. It's something that's it's really just so hard to replicate in the virtual world. So
that is definitely, Chris, one of the things I will miss the most. You know, it's just a really good time spending it with really cool people. It's a wonderful thing. What are you gonna miss, Paige? What do you think is? Do you miss flying to Las Vegas or Orlando?
I don't miss the flying part, but to echo what Chris was touching on is just being able to connect with all of our customers across the U.S. and even our own team members that we will get to see that often. It's just the social aspect is definitely will be missed.
How about you, Mike? What do you miss having to fly to Las Vegas or Orlando, or would you have driven there anyway?
I usually drive to both. So I make it wherever the show has been in the past. I've almost always gotten in my camper, drove out, and then make like you had mentioned earlier, making a little bit of a trip and, seeing what's in the area, be it in the greater Las Vegas area or in the Orlando area. In fact, I'm in Orlando right now, or just north of there. I didn't want to miss going to Florida. I already had it planned in my winter schedule. So even though the IBS isn't here this year and it's virtual, I headed down a while ago and spent a few warm days anyway.
So you picked the right time to leave, Mike.
So Mike, when you're traveling like that, is your camper have like a giant toolbox, or do you ship all your equipment out there?
Both. It all depends. Depending on what I'm doing at the shows, often I'll just buy a set of tools there at the show, or we'll arrange to get tools from manufacturers. So we work it out somehow.
Brian, do you miss traveling to Orlando or Las Vegas to attend the show?
I love traveling. So yeah, I like the whole thing, from having to get up and go through the whole rigmarole at the airport. But it is what it is. I think one thing I'll miss too is it's nice having the whole crew down there. We get along Dad comes with us. So
for you guys, it's also a family event. So I mean, that's different than a lot of folks, right?
Yeah, I've taken my family down there, and we've gone to Epcot, Animal Kingdom. When we do Las Vegas, the last time I left the family at home, we had the whole crew except for one guy, I think, with us. So it just wasn't very practical, but yeah, we have a lot of fun down there.
Rob, where have you traveled when you've gone to the builder show on the front or back end?
Well, so the first year that I went, my sister-in-law and her family absolutely love Vegas, and they go there like at least once a year. And they're not gamblers; they just think it's like a giant amusement park for adults. You know, there's so many things to do. There's so many things to do in that town, and so I know a lot of people can't do this because we're planning in the days leading up to the event, but I made sure that I blocked out some time just before and just after. I know a lot of people are so tired at the end of the show that they just want to get on the first plane they can after their responsibilities are done and get home. But I was like, I'm here. I'm going to take it all in. So the leading up to the show, we went to the Shelby Museum. We wandered around the Strip.
You might have to tell some of our listeners what that is, Rob.
Yeah, so Carroll Shelby, everyone knows about the Shelby Cobra and the Shelby Mustangs from the 60s. There's just a huge collection of his muscle cars and race cars there. It's pretty cool if you're into cars. In fact, after the show, I went to several car museums on my own. There was like a famous movie car museum, and but that's what I do. It's like when I travel by myself, I tend to just wander and to find every little local thing, not even necessarily the touristy stuff. I just like to explore. I just can't help myself.
Chris, have you done travel associated with the builder show?
Usually it's just in and out for the show itself. I don't really spend too much time outside. I have gone a couple days early just to be part of like the advanced prep team and things like that. So you get a little more time to have some fun. But for the most part, it's just wall-to-wall IBS that whole week.
You should maybe you and Paige could both answer this from the perspective of an exhibitor with a big booth and literally tons of stuff to ship out to Las Vegas or Orlando for this. Like, what is that like? How long does it take? Where does the stuff go, and where does it go when it's not at the show? Where do you store it? Like, where is all that stuff, and how does it get set up?
You're absolutely right. The booth design process is a long one, and we're working, starting in August or so, of getting what we're going to want to talk about, how we're going to want to talk about what that design looks like. It somewhere in the Chicago area is where we keep it, and it starts heading out there at least a good week, 10 days beforehand. Just one, the travel time, two, of getting everything all set up and good to go. And it's always coming together right at the end of the day, Monday, right before the curtain goes up anyway, no matter how much you plan ahead. The same thing with what we're doing with the virtual aspect of it. We're in a pretty good spot. It's all coming together, but it's just, dotting those T's, crossing those I's, getting those last little hurdles overcome to be ready for Tuesday morning.
You guys have exhibits or props that are, 2 stories tall. Like, is that stuff fit in a crate? Is it like come apart? How's it happen?
Several crates. Yeah. It's a good, at least one truckload of just booth pieces to head out there.
You're talking a trailer truckload, right?
Correct.
Do you guys build that yourself, or do you have a trade show? Because I actually, right before I came back to Taunton most recently, I worked for a company that built trade show booths. And so I know what it looks like on that backside. And in fact, if any of you, I'm sure all of you have been on the floor at the trade show the days leading up to it. And, once the floor is open and all the booths are set up, there's room for thousands and thousands of people. You can hardly walk. Like, there's hardly a square foot of carpet exposed when they're setting up all those booths. And it's kind of amazing to see how it all comes together. But
I don't know how someone doesn't get hit by a forklift. Like,
Come close a couple times. Yeah. You got to keep your eyes up.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And how do you guys coordinate with the, electricians who work for the convention center and the telecommunications people to run the outlets and the webcams and all the stuff?
It's a pretty involved process. Yeah, but luckily, especially Las Vegas and Orlando are convention centers that are used to running large conventions. And so the process of getting all of the electronic equipment and everything to each booth is fairly simple. Not simple. I'm not going to.
It's done by someone else when you say
it's done by
simple.
somebody else. Yeah. The interesting thing is people like the Kohler booth and stuff that do all the plumbing and everything. Like that is just impressive there.
I was trying to explain that to my son yesterday when he was asking me about the builder show. And it's hard to explain to someone who's never seen it, but Kohler has like decorative fountains. They have toilets to flush. They have showers with multiple jets that work. And it's staggering to see. And it must cost $1 million or more to do that, I'm sure.
Yeah, for a friend of mine.
The first time
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I remember my first IBS experience. I was walking in. You hear oomph, oomph. Like, what is this booth? And I was like, it's Kohler. Oh my gosh. It's impressive.
It's very impressive. What were you going to say, Rob?
I was going to say a friend of mine who works for one of those companies that sets up those booths was setting up one of the, I think it might have been Kohler, or one of the plumbing booths last year. And yeah, those trade show buildings are amazing because they're built into the floor, hidden in all these little hatches are built all of these utilities that they have to tap into. And but like you said, that's the convention centers like that. It's like a well-oiled machine. It's a process. They've been doing this for so long that they have all these different trades in there that know exactly what they're doing and know how to get the job done.
Jeff, can you talk a little bit about what it's like on your end to set up to record the podcast? And I know you've had to go running from booth to booth depending on where we were recording. Like, is that easier to do in one location or another?
They're pretty similar in terms of my setup. I've last couple of years I've gone earlier and helped set up the booth, so that helps me set up because I can, choose where I'm going to be and things like that. But usually, everything's right there, and if you need something, they're really quick with getting it to you.
And how much stuff do you have to bring? Like, are you able to check it on the airplane, or do you carry it on? Or like some of the gear you have is pretty expensive, I'm sure.
I carry on the camera. Everything else kind of goes into a Pelican case that I get down to like 49.5 pounds so that I can not have to pay extra.
Mike, when you have to present at one of those shows, do you have to take your own audio equipment and do you have to plan what you're going to present, or is that scripted for you? How's that work?
Oh, I script all my own stuff. I do it all on the fly. It's just, we have our topics, but as far as the equipment, audio, AV stuff, like Chris said, it's pretty much seamless. You order it and those people just set it all up, and they have technicians that just dial everything in ahead of time, because you got to figure they've probably got 400 or 500 different audio systems going on in the convention center. So they have to make sure that all of those frequencies are separated so you don't have any crosstalk. So you can't bring your own equipment. You have to use everything through the exhibition company.
God, I never thought of that. That would be a huge problem if your presentation is coming through someone else's speakers in another booth, right? Oh.
Yep.
Have any of you checked out what the class offerings are at IBSx? Mike was talking earlier about how important that is to many folks at the show, and sadly, I don't get a lot of time to do that. But what did you find, Mike?
Yeah, it's. So when I first started going to IBS in the late 90s, I could find a lot of education that was kind of geared towards me, like a small builder, maybe building 5 to 10 houses a year. But over the years, it's become more and more and more geared towards the education anyway, geared towards running a business, marketing and sales. And a lot of it's targeted towards larger scale builders. I looked through their offerings. I spent a couple hours last night just looking at what classes were available, if there were any that would interest me. I only found like 2, and most of those were on the building science side. But most of it's, design for 55 plus, dealing with the pandemic, running your business in a pandemic, retaining employees. So it's really geared towards larger builders, of which, when you think about it, the NAHB, it being a member association, most of the houses that are built by members are members who are building 200 or more homes per year. Those of us that focus on, single family, finely crafted homes are really in the minority as far as the production of homes in the United States in general. So they're not really geared towards us. And that's where the local smaller shows and like the Fine Homebuilding Summit geared towards us.
Do you think that's a fair assessment, Chris, of the builder show? Like, are they doing enough to cater to the small custom home builder and remodeler?
We're doing everything we can. Unfortunately, I haven't had much time to go see the classes or the seminars that they have at the show, but the custom home builder, the smaller builder, is definitely one of our core audiences, and so we try and reach out to them as much as possible. That's our gang that we have on the Instagram platform as part of the builder community, is mostly folks like Mike and Brian.
What about you, Brian? Are you going to try and check out some of the classes that are available at IBSx?
Pretty much anything that might be recorded, I might be more inclined to pick it up later. And I think that's a nice thing about this, is I can't split myself all over the place. I did have a nice experience 2 or 3 years ago out in the show village. They had an aero barrier presentation. And so I made sure to catch that. And Steve Basic was there, and I'm pretty sure he fell asleep. And so I was messing with him, texting him during the presentation. But now we use aero barrier. So just something like that can make all the difference in the world.
Well, I got one other question for Paige, because it's been one I've wanted to ask someone from Huber for 2 decades now. Paige, what is the special sauce in Advantech that makes it so much better or more weather resistant to every other floor sheathing? What is it?
It really comes down to our manufacturing process.
That's what you guys always say.
I'm always impressed every time I go to our mills. And if you ever do have the opportunity after the pandemic to join Huber at one of our mills, you've got to go. It's just so incredible to see the consistency and the quality and the recipes that they pull through the mill from going through the blades to finishing it off at the finish line to the spray booth for the edge seal. It's just incredible. And they take a lot of pride in the products that they put out. We all do. We take a lot of pride in it. But the special sauce is, I don't know, is it cheesy to just say heart and love? Because it's
I went
really
to chemistry Page,
process.
but you're not going to give me that.
Yeah. We all know that it's really difficult to work with MDI in the manufacturing process. And, we do have a proprietary resin load that includes MDI, as everyone knows that, makes the panel Advantech for us.
And you're
Any
going to want to tune
final
in.
thoughts?
Is that a good marketing answer for you? Sorry.
Yeah, that's what I expected, Paige. That's all right. What were you going to say, Chris?
I was going to say you're going to want to tune in the first day, because Paige has been working really hard on something special of kicking Advantech up a notch. So it's
a special sauce.
We're bringing it up. Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to really make you intrigued by this, Patrick. We're going to be launching a new product in the subflooring category at IBSx. We've got over 20 years of experience in researching and understanding the subflooring category and what our customers want, who they are throughout the U.S. and the different climate zone regions. And we're really pumped to finally launch a new subflooring category that's going to be above and beyond Advantech. So it's going to be Advantech X Factor. You know, if you think about the innovation of Huber and the subflooring category, we launched Advantech in 97. People thought we were crazy. Like, no one's going to like use that panel. It's too expensive. It's too much. You don't need all of that resin packed in there. But because we do so much voice of customer research with our customers and the custom guys, I mean, these are the folks that have always been the segment that we want to be able to make products for. And we just proved everybody wrong. And so we carried this torch all the way up until now, and we continue to do research in these areas. So we launched subfloor adhesive because we knew that squeaks was the biggest pain point of builders. So we wanted to be able to offer that flooring solution. So where we are today is Advantech X Factor. What it is it's all the strength and stiffness that you would expect from Advantech. But we've added 3 different buckets that for the product category that it solves is we've enhanced our tongue and groove. And what I mean by that is, you know, we see so many installation problems out in the field where framers are still jamming those seams together no matter.
With a sledgehammer.
With a sledgehammer, you know, which is fine. Like if you gotta tap it in a little bit, you're like, I get it. But you don't need to slam it so close that it's just jammed together because we have no room for linear expansion. So when we do have a rain event, everyone's like raising all the flags, we have edge fill. Well, it's not really edge fill, it's insulation, but we love our customers. And so we'll go ahead and take care of it as a claim. So what we've done now is with that enhancement of the tongue and groove, previously we had the shelf. We've now redesigned that. So it's going to take up to 2 times the actual compression force to close that gap. So if you are closing the gap on the new Advantech tongue and groove, like you've got the rock on your job site. And we expect people to be like, man, it's really hard to get together. We're like, ding, ding, ding. Like that's our goal, is to keep that 1/8 of an inch gap. So sometimes we just got to go back to the fundamentals. I know that, you know, at IBS, we talk about so many great products and new construction methodologies, but we still have a problem with people slamming subflooring together. So we still have to tackle that issue. So that's one of the check marks from the installation perspective that we've been able to overcome. And then also we have an overlay on top of it. It's not a zip overlay. It's different in the composition, but it is an overlay that goes on top of it. So it's able to soothe it out. So I've just got a little sample here. So it's a little gold overlay on top of it. And so that helps with a few things. It's fade resistant. That's one of the builder feedbacks that we got is, you know, high-end custom home builders, one of the biggest problems that they have on the job site is if we have a long construction build, homeowners come on site, start freaking out when they see the graying of the panel, and you have to walk them off a ledge. It's not rotting. It's okay. It's not mold. And so with that overlay, it just helps from that appearance perspective, and you can keep the homeowners at bay with any type of concerns with long construction cycles. And I'm sorry if I'm going too long or.
No, go ahead.
Okay. And then we do have the color, so that's going to stand out from like a marketing perspective, which is one of the things that our builders liked in our research is just like zip, it's easily identifiable from the builder, but also to their homeowners is how can we connect our premium builder products that the homeowner understands? So they go on a job site, they see subflooring, it all looks the same to them, right? But when you see something with a very distinct overlay on top of it, and you know that that's premium, it's so much more memorable. And that's what some of the builders wanted in the custom markets, which is what this is targeted for. This isn't.
Can you tile it, Paige? Does the overlay mess up bonding?
Yeah, we've done third-party testing with the bonding and the adhesives, and we've got that letter that we don't see any issues with. I mean, you still need to follow the manufacturer's recommendations for any type of finished flooring. It's not going to replace a slip sheet with hardwood flooring, which is one of the questions that kept coming up. You know, maybe version 2 will, we don't know yet, but, and then lastly is just performance. With that overlay, it does give you a short-term benefit from bulk water. If you have that high rain event, you can easily just sweep it off. You don't have any telegraphing of the flakes. It'll kind of get a little fuzzy on top. None of that's happening. You still have that smooth, consistent surface. So when you do get to finish flooring, and you know, the tile guy and hardwood flooring guy is like, hey, we got to sand all these panels. the intent here is to continue not to have that step. And
What's
then
the premium over the normal Advantech page? And I'm guessing you'll still offer normal Advantech, right?
yes, so classic Advantech, if you will still be the core of Advantech subflooring brand. We do expect there to be builders that step up, especially our custom builders, to Advantech X. The premium is going to be $4 to $5 per panel, but we have a rebate, a first-time user rebate that's coming out. So you try it, that's going to be at the same price as Advantech coming out the gate. We really need builders to experience, to your points earlier about virtual, missing, touching and feeling things. I couldn't agree more, because when we talk about this concept in the boardroom versus taking them to the job site to see it, it's a completely different experience. So I'm really excited to see builders try it in the field and continue to give them what they want.
Did you have any questions for Paige, Mike?
Yeah, I do. So you already asked the bonding question, because that was one of my first thoughts, thinking there was going to be an overlay. Is we use a lot of construction adhesive, and we use it in different places, so we wouldn't want to have a bonding problem. So that's good to know. So that edge profile and the 2 tons of force required to jam it too tight is amazing. Are you going to, if you've got the edge profile that you're going to use on the new product, will that same edge profile be utilized in the regular Advantech line?
Yes, our long-term goal is to carry that over to Advantech. It's just cutter heads and putting it in the mills, because this product's going to only be manufactured out of our stack presses, so pretty much our East Coast mills. But until we have all the cutter heads for all the mills to be able to service all the Advantech network, we're working towards it.
It's surprising how those little changes have so much effort into it.
So I got a question.
Will the new product be available across the country, or is it going to be just, will the new product be across the country, or will it just be in certain regions to begin with?
So it will be available across the country, but freight will probably not be the most favorable if we were to manufacture it out of Commerce to ship it to, I don't know, Oregon. It's only going to be manufactured out of our Easton, Commerce, and Crystal mills, which are all on the East Coast. So most likely just service people in that mill network.
What were you going to say, Rob?
Oh, I was going to say, I'm curious about the sort of the need for that stronger edge. Do you think that the builders who are smashing those things home are just getting a little too carried away, or do you think some people just think, oh my God, there's a gap there, I haven't closed it up, and it just seems natural to? Have you gotten feedback on that?
It's completely natural. We go to the job site, and we often, like when we do voice of customer, we just do observations, watch them, see how it goes, and then later we're like, why? You're really working hard at getting those panels together. What was holding you up? Was it the tongue and groove? They're like, no, you got to get it tight. So we had to re-educate. But it's truly an education piece. And, I used to swing a hammer back in the day. And I remember laying Advantech, actually. And I would sit there and slam it all day long to get it tight. I knew no better.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you're trained as a carpenter, you make things tight. That's part of the job.
I didn't know about linear expansion. I was just like young in school doing what the old guys told me to do. Lucky to have a job.
Right. Mike, you got any final thoughts before we part company?
I'm just looking forward to seeing how this virtual trade show can work, because I have been disappointed by other ones I've seen over the year. Fortunately, the IBS has had, a number of months, and maybe looking at some of those other virtual trade shows that didn't hit the mark, to be able to refine theirs to a level that will actually be useful. And that's really what I'm looking for, both on the exhibitor side and on the demonstration training side. And I want to see how they're going to make this virtual connecting peer-to-peer. They have a whole portion of their website for peer-to-peer connections. I'm curious how that's all going to work. So we'll just have to wait and see, and then we can report on it.
Go ahead, Brian.
Last year, my brother won most meticulous job site at the Best of Huber Social Awards. And I've known my brother for over 40 years now. And that was a shocker. So I look forward to see if he's going to win like tallest framer or something along those lines.
It'll be, I don't know if you've been keeping up with what your brother's been doing as part of gearing up for the show, but it is one, he has such a great personality and he's so educational in what he's presenting. So we have him a couple times. He's partnered up with Christy Williamson for one of our educational pieces. And he is, we have such a great group of people that we work really closely with, and to try and hit on kind of what we've talked about before of the part that we're missing out is seeing everybody and being social. We really tried to incorporate as many of our builder friends into our programming as possible. Tim's one of them. Steve and Jake and Matt Reisinger are all one of them. And actually, I've been trying to work a way to kind of leverage builders across the country to be able to submit programming that we can then highlight in our show to be able to incorporate even more people. So, but through that, through the chat, through the ability to reach out and touch somebody virtually, through the type of content, we're trying not to just do demos. We're trying to make it an actual show, something that you kind of watch on TV. And so we're really looking forward to being able to bring that all together for people.
Rob, can you talk a little bit about Fine Homebuilding's coverage of IBSx and what folks can expect in the days to come, please?
Well, if you just head to our website, head to finehomebuilding.com, and we'll keep we've got a sort of a all-encompassing post on the homepage that's basically we're going to be our clearinghouse for everything that we do. We're going to still try to do everything that we do. We've got the multiple podcasts. We got this additional feature, which we've got 2 roundtable discussions with experts on some important topics. We've got we're going to do our best to like everybody else to see what's new in products, materials, gear, and we have a few. We'll have daily blogs about show highlights. So we're going to just try to do the best of what we typically do when we're there. And
we're doing 4 other podcasts, right, Rob?
4 other podcasts, 2 roundtable discussions, and probably half a dozen blog posts. And of course, watch our social media account to see what we're accounts on the various platforms to see what we're up to. I think to Brian's point earlier, we were talking about the education. If there's things that are recorded that you can catch up with later, and I think that's one of the benefits of something like this is that we're going to miss the one-on-one conversations, but the fact that all of this stuff is documented online and recorded, it gives you a little more bandwidth to see more stuff and to sort of go back and take a look at the stuff that you discovered while you were there, instead of just leafing through your swag bag at the end of the week.
Well, I would tell everyone who's listening out there to stay tuned for tomorrow's coverage. And I want to thank everyone for being on the panel today, the podcast panel, I'm calling it. If any of you listening have any questions about IBSx or for the podcast generally, please send them to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And if it's something you want to learn about the show or want us to cover, let us know. We'll be monitoring that so we can answer your requests. Stay safe, everybody. Thanks very much for listening. Stay tuned to future coverage from the IBSx Builder Show.